What is magical realism? Magical realism is a literary movement associated with a writing style that incorporates magical or supernatural events into realistic narrative without questioning their improbability. This fusion of fact and fantasy is meant to question the nature of reality, as well as call attention to the act of creation. By making lived experience appear extraordinary, magical realist writers contribute to a re-envisioning of a culture as vibrant and complex. Magical realism originated in the fictional writing of Spanish-American writers in the mid-20th century. It is generally claimed to have begun in the 1940s, with the publication of two important novels, Men of Maze by Guatemalan writer Miguel Ángel Asturias, and The Kingdom of This World by Cuban writer Alejo Carpentier. These two novels fused historically correct settings with supernatural events, such as people transforming into animals, slaves being helped by the dead, and time moving backward. The fantastical qualities of magical realism were heavily influenced by the Surrealist movement in Europe during the 1920s, and the literary avant-gardism, exotic natural surroundings, native and exiled cultures, and tumultuous political histories of Latin America. Now, although other Latin American writers, such as the Argentinian Jorge Luis Borges and the Mexican Carlos Fuentes, used elements of magic and fantasy in their work, it was not until the publication in English of Gabriel Garcia Marquez's 100 Years of Solitude in 1970 that the movement became an international phenomenon. Subsequently, women writers such as the Chilean Isabel Allende and the Mexican Laura Esquivel became part of the movement's later developments, focusing on women's issues and perceptions of reality. Since its beginning, magical realism has become a technique used widely in all parts of the world. Writers from other countries, such as the British-American Salman Rushdie, the Russian-Soviet Mikhail Bulgakov, and the Japanese Haruki Murakami, have been added to the movement's list of writers because of their use of magical elements in real-life historical settings. Themes. Exploration of Latin American identity. A theme that runs through nearly every magical realist text is the urge to redefine Latin American identity. They do so by forging a point of view specific to the events, history, and culture of that region. As such, Latin America's history of colonization, the importation of slaves and influx of immigrants, the political tumult after its independence, and its economic dependency on imperial powers, become subjects that are rewritten and retold from an alternative point of view. For example, Carpenter's The Kingdom of This World is told by a slave who is witness to traumatic events in Haiti during the 18th and 19th centuries. For many writers, magical realist techniques were used as an attempt to break with many of their inherited representations, by engaging with oral histories of indigenous people, as found in Asturias's Men of Maze. Importance of magic and myth. Another defining aspect of magic realist texts is the power of magic and myth to create a version of reality that is different from what is normally considered as real. In doing so, they rely on legends and myths from oral pre-Columbian cultures, family histories, narratives of explorers and priests, and the spiritual magic of African slaves in the Caribbean. Drawing from these influences, magical realist writers redraw the parameters of reality by using legends and myths that have been passed down from generations and that invoke some kind of loss caused by modernity, such as the loss of traditional values, as in Garcia Marquez's 100 Years of Solitude, and the loss of the intimate relationship between humans and animals. These mythical influences often act as a resistance against oppression and exploitation, like in the case of Men of Maze and The Kingdom of This World. A critique of rationality and progress. The use of magic and myth in magical realist fiction can be viewed as a critique of rationality and progress. Because many South American countries were economically exploited by the West, first through slavery and then through economic imperialism, magical realist writers attempted to subvert the values they emphasized in order to justify such exploitation. Thus logic, progress and linearity are cast aside for a reliance on emotions, the senses, circularity, and ritual. For example, Asturias's Men of Maze consistently thwarts the notions of progress and rationality, by presenting the perspectives of indigenous peoples as outside the traditional concepts of time. Rather than present the reader with a linear narrative, Asturias divides his book into 6 chapters, each exploring an aspect of indigenous beliefs that counter Western conceptions of time, rationality, and progress. The notion of progress and its relation to technology is also critiqued in Garcia Marquez's 100 Years of Solitude, particularly its relationship to economic imperialism. For example, the railroad that is finally established in Macondo is viewed as both a sign of Macondo's assimilation into the modern world, and a metaphor for its eventual exploitation by the North American Banana Company. And lastly, questioning of reality. Many magic realist writers use language in innovative ways that raise doubts about the concept of reality, as well as art's ability to imitate it. For them, reality is much more ambiguous and complicated than meets the eye. Rather than create a realistic fiction that mimics the external world, magical realists use a variety of techniques that make readers question the nature of reality. For Garcia Marquez and Allende, for example, reality constitutes both real and imagined actions, such as the levitation of a priest, the appearances of the dead, and the transcendent powers of animals. For Borges, on the other hand, reality becomes an exploration of multiple universes and existences, and is portrayed not as external and objective, but rather as subjectively created in human thought. For many magical realist writers, existence is a concept that does not have a one-to-one correspondence with observed reality. By subverting the assumption of an observed reality through fantasy, they suggest that language cannot depict reality accurately. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, follow us on social media, and subscribe to our channel for more related content. Thank you, and see you in our next one.